Hello and good day, geometry. Here with you to talk about rectangles, a shape that you first learned about when you were probably 2 or 3 years old and got those like wooden puzzles with the shapes you had to put in the places thing. Rectangle, standard shape, but it turns out there's a lot to them that you probably didn't know when you first learned about them way back in the day. So we're starting very similarly to how we started in CO46, because like we talked about, the parallelogram family basically has 3 parts to it. You've got a rhombus, you've got a rectangle, and you've got a square. Okay, all 3 shapes share the same 5 characteristics, right? And there are certain things that separate one from another. So because a rectangle is a parallelogram, what do we already know about it? Ooh, I can't call on all of you at once, so please. Because a rectangle is a parallelogram. We filled this out. This is your entire page on for CO45, and the same 5 things we wrote down on the top of CO46 when we were talking about a rhombus, which is also a parallelogram. Christopher, give me one. Okay. You will write this down. Opposite sides are congruent. It's true for a rhombus. It is true for a rectangle. Number 2, what else do we know about a rectangle simply because it is a parallelogram? Grayson. Opposite sides are parallel. Okay, that is true. What else? Josh. We got that one, but what's the other piece of opposite congruent parts? Opposite angles. Opposite angles are congruent. In a rhombus, no. Well, yes, but we're not there. That's one of the ones that separates a rectangle from the others, particularly a rhombus. But these are the 5 things that are true for all parallelograms, which is every rhombus, every rectangle, and every square, what they all have in common. What else do all parallelograms have in common? Adjacent angles are supplementary. Okay, and the last one has to do with the diagonals. Christopher? They bisect each other? Yes, the diagonals bisect each other. When I was doing my student teaching in a kindergarten class, my math lesson failed considerably, not because I was teaching them incorrectly, but I tried to teach them all the properties of a rectangle, and it did not go well. They left knowing it had 4 sides. That was basically it. But that was kind of a joke. Sorry. Never mind. I was saying I was teaching kindergarten about rectangles and all the different properties, but it's a little bit above there. Okay. What separates a rectangle from other parallelograms? So here's where it kind of differentiates itself. Chris said that all angles are congruent. Okay. Different from a rhombus, right? Rhombus, because it has those slanted sides, not all 4 angles are congruent. In a rectangle, they are. And not only that, but what measure do all 4 angles have? They are all right angles. Okay? They are all right angles. So similar to a rhombus contains right angles as well. However, they are where the diagonals intersect each other rather than in the corners like we have in a rectangle. The other thing, anybody have a guess as to what the other thing? It has to do with the diagonals. The other thing that separates a rectangle from a rhombus in particular.
They don't form a right angle when they bisect?
They do not form a right angle. That's not what it is, though. Noah? Sorry? Yes, that kind of, yes, that's what separates it from a rhombus, but not particular here. Colin?
The diagonals bisect each pair of opposite angles?
They do that. Let me draw them in there. What kind of do you notice about the diagonals? Evan? The diagonals are congruent. Okay? Diagonals are congruent. They still bisect each other, as in all parallelograms, number 5 up above here, but they do not form right angles when they intersect, like a rhombus does, and they are congruent. Okay, also unlike a rhombus. Questions on these 7 items here, because once we get these down, we can jump down to the practice below, and it's just knowing what these are. So, anyone still need to write them down? Okay, so let's look down to rectangle, QRTS, and I give you a little bit of information here. I tell you that QS equals 10. So the diagonal going from Q to S, that does equal 10. And from that information, that's all I'm giving you, that and one angle RTS, you are to find SRT, QPR, QPR, PQRR, SRT, and then another kind of real world problem down below there. So I'm going to let you get to work on this a little bit. We'll pause the video, come back and talk about it in about 10 minutes or so. So with that, get to work. And we are back. Probably the biggest thing, folks, probably the biggest thing as I was going around and helping people and answering questions was remember that the angles in the middle where P is here, they are not right angles. Okay, they are not right angles. So some of you, when it came time to find QR, we're kind of treating this as a right triangle here. It's not a right triangle. Okay, because this angle down here is not a right angle. Your right triangles come from the corners. Here are your right triangles. Here's one, right? Here's a second one. Okay, with those right angles there in the corners, not in the middle. That's a rhombus. All right, so just need to remember that. So let's go through some answers here. SRT, what's that one going to be? SRT. What? 56 is correct. Angle SRT is 56 degrees. Angle QPR. QPR, ready? 112. Again, proving it's not a right angle. And how you might find that? This is not a right triangle here, but what type of triangle is it? It is an obtuse triangle, classified by its sides. It's isosceles. Okay? And we know that because the diagonals bisecting each other and being congruent, this has got to be a 34-degree angle down there as well. And you know that. Which means that this one, to complete the 180, has got to be 112. Okay? QP, what did you come up with for QP? If QS is 10, QP is going to be 5 because the diagonals bisect each other. And they're congruent, which means that we've got a 5 here, a 5 here, a 5 here, and a 5 here. Which means that this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, right? No, it's not a right triangle. Okay? It is not a right triangle. It is an isosceles triangle, but not a 45, 45, 90 triangle. RP is also 5. We got that there as well. Side QR, the temptation here is to use perhaps Pythagorean Theorem, 5 squared plus 5 squared equals hypotenuse squared. However, again, not a right triangle. Cannot do that. So instead, knowing that this angle is 34 up here, and that this is your right angle here, what you could do, right? That QS representing the hypotenuse, QR being the side that we want to find, okay? One option is to set up the cosine of 34 equals adjacent side x over hypotenuse 10, okay? And that gets you approximately 8. I think it actually ends up being like 8.29 or something, right? Okay. RS, now we can use Pythagorean Theorem. We know that this is 8.29 or so up here. The hypotenuse is 10. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We can use that to find RS. And what did you come up with for that one? Approximately 6. More specifically?
I just said 6.
Approximately 5.59.
5.59. Okay. If you put 6, it's close. Shh, boys. And then RT, the other diagonal, if QS is 10, RT will also be 10 because the diagonals are congruent. And then finally, paint is $1.95 per square unit. How much would it cost to paint the inside of the rectangle? When we're talking about rectangles, the inside of them, what are we referring to? Josh, the area. The area of a rectangle is base times height, or in this case, 5.59 times 8.29, and ultimately times 1.995, yes.
I just simplified the 6, but not the 8, so I got it.
So this is 46.34, which when you multiply that by $1.95, gives you $90.37. Okay. Now, if you rounded to 8 and 6 here, if you got 8 for QR and 6 for this, you got 48 times 195. You were off by about $3.30. Okay. Big difference? Nah, no. But like we talked about before, whenever you round something, you're losing some of that accuracy, and then using those rounded values again later on. It's best to keep these rounded to nearest hundredth. Okay, on the test, I'm going to expect you to round side lengths to nearest hundredth, not the nearest whole. So 8.29 is the better answer. 5.59 is the better answer. And then lastly, what are 2 ways in which a rectangle is different from a rhombus? We've talked about, well, one way. The diagonals are congruent for a rectangle. Rhombus, they are not. In a rectangle, your 4 right angles are in the corners, whereas in a rhombus, they're in the middle where the diagonals intersect. Rhombus has 4 congruent sides. Rectangle doesn't. Rectangle has 4 right angles. Rhombus doesn't. Lots of things that you could put down for that. A lot of similarities, a lot of differences as well. Okay? That is going to wrap up CO47. We will stop the video before we go on PO48. So until 5 seconds from now, that's how you math.